You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Thanks for staying with us. So we continue looking at the various amendments on the ballot in Florida this fall. Daniel Cronrath and J.R. Woodward, both professors at FSCJ, and I'm going to say experts when it comes to this topic. We're talking through some of the different amendments, how they're worded, and what they mean to you. So I wanted to point out this one. Amendment 9, we'll show you some of the information here. Amendment 9 prohibits offshore oil and gas drilling. Pretty straightforward, and also prohibits vaping in indoor workplaces. So this might be an example of saying, how are those two things connected? And I've got to vote yes or no kind of in tandem on both of those things when I vote for that particular amendment.
Right. I think I'm going to let Dr. Woodward try to explain how they're actually related. But
that must be tough. But he's kicking the can down the road to you.
But what we're looking at is the Constitution Revision Commission. Of course, with citizen initiatives, they have to be one issue. But with the Constitution Revision Commission is able to bundle issues. And the rationale behind that is because if they approached all of these as separate issues, we may have anywhere from 25 to 30 ballot amendments. It would end up looking like a California-style ballot, for example, where voters would be intimidated because of the length of the ballot. However, in certain cases, as Dr. Woodward knows, it ends up that you end up getting completely disparate issues, or what you would think are disparate issues. However, the Constitution Revision Commission has a different take on that.
Yeah. Right, yeah, they viewed these as a clean air and clean water issue. So they just put them together thinking they're both essentially about pollution of the water, pollution of the air. And so to them, they said, we'll group these there as one. But this amendment is actually currently under review, so it was...
What's that mean, under review?
Well, we're not sure for sure if it's going to be on the final ballot, right? So it was kicked off, the state appeal, and it's currently under review at the First District Court of Appeals. I assume they'll make a decision before November, but we don't have one yet. So, and that was the main reason, is because the language just is not clear.
So, and I want to point out, so I've got my sample ballot here. So there are ballots going out for overseas, and the early ballots are already printed up. So if people are voting on this and ultimately it gets thrown out, that just means that there's no voting on it.
Right. It's also important to note, too, that when the court is looking at these, the court has already ruled in favor of the constitutionality of bundling. This isn't a matter of the Constitution Revision Commission not having the right to bundle. It's a matter of ambiguity. Does, for example, with Amendment 8, which has already been struck from the ballot, which was going to basically give Tallahassee the ability to create charter schools rather than that occurring at the local level. The issue with the amendment is that the word charter was not mentioned anywhere in the language. So the court struck that because it was too ambiguous for the voter to understand. However, the constitutionality of actually bundling them, that's not an issue. The court has ruled that that's okay.
How about that? Well, let me point out another one that I know has got a lot of interest. That's Amendment 13. Amendment 13 phases out dog racing in connection with wagering, and it would be phased out everywhere in Florida by 2020. And on this ballot, it says, or on the issue, it says it does not affect other gaming. So this is one that's maybe a little controversial as well, because some people are saying we want to enjoy the entertainment aspect, and we don't want, we do want legalized ways that we can wager or gamble. What are you hearing, and how would you explain what's on Amendment 13 here?
What I've heard, many people just see it as sort of a relic of the past, dog racing. It's only a couple states that still have it, very few that allow you to bet on it, and the use of these tracks has gone down over the years as well. So to regulate the tracks is actually, we're spending more money than the actual revenue that's coming in from the tracks. However, the tracks still employ people, and this is a private industry that the Constitution is essentially making a constitutional amendment to get rid of a private industry. And so that as you said, it's a very controversial issue. There are some egregious examples of abuse of the dogs, and then there are other people that say, well, then let's just regulate it better and keep working with the legislation to keep it alive and not get rid of the entire sport. You can still race dogs, you just can't gamble at the tracks while racing dogs.
And is there some polling that says where we're headed here? Does it look like this is going to pass, we're going to fail?
Yeah, this is one of those issues that looks, right now I think it's going to be up in the air. Some of these amendments, for example, is Amendment 1, Amendment 2, Amendment 5, which deal with reducing taxes. Not surprisingly, those are very
popular?
Pretty popular with most folks who pay taxes. Amendment 13 is kind of up in the air right now, relative to even folks, who don't necessarily gamble and, don't choose to gamble. They're not fans of dog racing. There's really not a lot of consensus right now how the electorate's going to go, because we know after 2006, now we have to have 60%. We have to have a supermajority in order to pass these versus 50%. So we'll have to wait and see on Amendment 13.
Yeah, so let me point out one more if we have time. That's Amendment 6. This is called the Rights of Crime Victims, and basically says that the courts have to facilitate victims' rights, raises the mandatory retirement age of justices. This struck me as something that, well, maybe this is bundled too, because again, I'm thinking how does advocating for family members of victims and their rights really relate to that judge can wait until 75 to retire instead of having to retire at 70? Is this bundling also?
Yeah, I believe so. And there's also a third piece to that of state judges not giving too much deference to administrative courts and administrative law judges. So there's even like a third part in there as well. That can sort of tie in with the judges piece at least, I guess. And Florida's one, there's some states, many states that don't have any age requirement on judges, how long they can stay. And so this one is trying to push that up, and I don't think there's a ton of opposition to that. But then, as you say, it's lumped in with Marcy's Law, which is what it's typically called. And that one has produced a lot of opinions, very strong opinions. Certain people within the law enforcement community support that. Other people, for example, the Florida Bar's Criminal Law Association is opposed to that. And so you have some pretty heavy hitters going back and forth on that.
And just to wind up what we're talking about here when it comes to Marcy's Law and that component of this Amendment 6 that we're just talking about, Justice Coalition here in Jacksonville has been very vocal about the victims of crime, the families of victims of crime need to have some kind of advocacy there, and they've been strong proponents of it. I'm a strong proponent of people being educated when they go to vote. So you got very, very helpful to wade through what is sometimes kind of confusing for people. It's not just, do you like this candidate better than that candidate or what have you. It's some of the details here. Thanks for walking through it with us this morning.
Thank you very much.